It feels like a lifetime ago, but I can still recall the first time I saw Ralph with startling clarity. He was 20, I was 18, and we were at a small gathering in the town hall, a simple affair, really. The kind of party where everyone knows everyone. It wasn't grand, but there was something about him that stood out. Perhaps it was his posture, so assured, yet unassuming, or the deep blue of his eyes, reminiscent of the sea he had once sailed across in his youth. His presence was steady, as though he carried the weight of the world, yet didn't let it burden him. He smiled at me, a soft, genuine smile, and I felt as though the earth beneath my feet shifted, just slightly, in that very moment. We spoke, of course. It was nothing extraordinary, just words exchanged in the heat of youth, but I felt something that, in hindsight, now feels more like a whispered promise. A spark. A beginning. I married Ralph not long after. It wasn't a grand love affair, not one of wild passions or dramatic confessions. No. Ours was a slow burn, a steady warmth that deepened over the years, until we were a part of each other. A partnership, solid, reliable, and complete. We built a life together in the truest sense of the word. We had children, 4 boys, each of them a testament to our union. I remember the first time I held our eldest, Sean. I looked at Ralph, who was beside me, as we marveled at the little life we had created. It was at that moment I realized the depth of our connection, the way we had so seamlessly woven our futures into one shared existence. I took care of the home, as a wife and mother does. Ralph worked long hours, first with the Navy, then in the civilian world. He had always been dedicated to providing for us. We never wanted for anything, financial stability, yes, but more than that, we had the kind of quiet contentment that people often envy. There were moments, too, of spontaneous laughter, the soft touches of affection in the quiet spaces between the chaos of raising a family. We had our struggles, of course, but we faced them together. Our home in Orlando was more than just a house. It was a sanctuary where we all came together, where Ralph and I, despite the challenges, continued to build a future. I often think back on those years with a deep sense of gratitude. There was purpose in every role I played. I was mother, wife, caretaker. And Ralph, well, Ralph was the stronghold of our family, the one who led us through each phase of our lives. Together, we raised our children with the values we held dear: hard work, integrity, loyalty. Our lives were filled with moments of joy, watching our boys grow into men, seeing them with their own families now, with children of their own. It was beautiful, fulfilling even. Yet, it was never perfect. Perfection was never the point. We had always found beauty in the effort, in the quiet understanding between us, in the way our lives intertwined like the roots of an old tree, steadfast and unyielding. And then, as time does, it began to change. Not abruptly. No, it crept in, like the slow encroachment of dusk, imperceptible at first. Ralph retired from the Navy, and I thought, perhaps naively, that the years of busyness had ended. At first, we relished the quiet of our days. The children were grown, the house was peaceful. I had hoped we would find new joy in these golden years. Yet, something shifted, almost imperceptibly, between us. There were still moments of affection, of course, hugs at the end of a long day, kisses before we fell asleep. But the vibrancy of life, the excitement, seemed to have dulled. Ralph and I, two people who had once been the very breath of each other's existence, found ourselves inhabiting the same space without truly connecting. I knew he loved me. I knew it with the certainty that comes with decades of shared history. But love was not enough, not anymore. It was then I began to notice how the days blurred together, each indistinguishable from the last. Routine became the axis upon which our lives spun, and I was suffocating under its weight. Was this all there was to look forward to? The silence in our home was subtle, yet suffocating, a silence not born from comfort, but from a slow drift between Ralph and me. It wasn't loud, but it was undeniably there, woven into the fabric of our everyday lives. Mornings had become mechanical. Ralph would wake early, pour his coffee, and settle into his chair by the window to read the paper, his attention distant, detached. I'd prepare breakfast, eggs, toast, bacon, and there was no need for words. Our exchanges had become polite, functional. "Did you sleep well?" I'd ask. "Fine," Ralph would reply, his tone flat. It wasn't that he didn't care, but there was no curiosity behind his words anymore. The warmth between us, the small gestures of affection, had gradually faded. It was as if we were two people cohabiting a space, merely existing side by side without truly connecting. I started to feel invisible. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet, unspoken way that happens when you've shared decades together, and the dynamic shifts without either of you realizing it. Ralph no longer seemed to notice the small changes in me, nor did I notice them in him. We simply went through the motions. I would make dinner, clean the house, and wait for him to come home from his solitary activities. There was no more spark, no more excitement, just the hollow echo of a life once full of passion. The worst part, neither of us acknowledged it. I would try to rekindle something, suggest a trip, a spontaneous dinner, but Ralph would shrug it off, as if he, too, had settled into this monotonous rhythm. I wanted more. I wanted something to break this cycle, to make me feel alive again. But nothing ever came. At night, in the silence of our bed, I would lie awake, feeling the distance between us grow, not physically, but in every other way. Ralph would sleep soundly beside me, and I would wonder if he, too, felt this emptiness, but I never asked. I couldn't. It would mean admitting the truth, admitting that we were no longer who we had been. We had become strangers, silent companions, sharing a home but not a life. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I wanted was something I could no longer find in Ralph or in our life together. The years had worn away the edges of our passion, leaving only the hollow shell of what once was. I needed something to stir me, something to make me feel alive again. The joy of raising children, the thrill of early romance, all of it seemed like a distant memory. I longed for excitement, for adventure, for the kind of passion I had known in my 20s. I had not forgotten what it was like to feel that kind of fire, that hunger for life that courses through your veins, the kind of desire that can only be satisfied by truly living, by breaking free of the confines of your everyday existence. I had spent so many years fulfilling my duties as a wife and mother that I had forgotten what it meant to live for myself. And so, the thoughts began to take root. What if? What if I could still have it? What if there was more to life than this quiet, predictable existence? I began to entertain the idea, to wonder if there was a way to feel that rush of excitement again, to experience the intensity of youth, even at my age. It wasn't a thought born of malice, not at first. It was simply a desire, a longing to reclaim something I had lost, something I had forgotten. I wanted to feel alive, to feel wanted, to remember what it was like to be desired, to be seen, not just as a wife, but as a woman. I met him at the gym. His name was Mark, a man who was far younger than Ralph. I didn't seek him out. It wasn't deliberate. But his attention was undeniable. And in that attention, in his gaze, I felt something stir inside me, a spark that had long since been extinguished in my marriage. I should have known better. But I didn't. It started so innocently. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The gym, where I had gone for years as a way to stay fit, had always been just a routine, a small escape from the constant hum of daily life. But when I met Mark, everything changed. He was younger, vibrant, with an energy that seemed to fill the room. I didn't plan it. I didn't even seek it. But the way he looked at me, with such intensity, such admiration, it stirred something deep inside me that had lain dormant for far too long. His smile was disarming, and there was a softness in his voice that felt like a balm to the dull ache I had been carrying in my chest for months. He noticed me. Really noticed me. Not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a woman, alive, vibrant, and, for the first time in ages, seen. We exchanged small talk at first, casual comments about the exercises, the weather, but soon, his attention became more focused. His compliments were genuine, uncalculated, and I found myself drawn to them, to him. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just harmless flattery. After all, I was still married to Ralph, wasn't I? But there was something about Mark that made me feel alive again, something I hadn't felt in years. The first touch was subtle, almost innocent. A hand on my back as he corrected my posture, the kind of thing any trainer might do. But it lingered a bit longer than it should have. My heart raced. I pretended I hadn't noticed, that it meant nothing. But I did notice. I felt it. Then came the evening when I couldn't stop myself. It wasn't a decision, it was more like a compulsion, a need that had been slowly building inside me, and I could no longer deny it. He kissed me. Just once, but it felt like 1,000 emotions were crashing through me all at once. The warmth of his lips against mine, the closeness, the intensity of the moment, it was everything I had been missing, everything I had been starved for. I know now how wrong it was. I can see it more clearly in the quiet reflection of my thoughts. But then, in that moment, I didn't care. All I cared about was the rush of life that surged through me. It was as though I had been drowning for years, and Mark's presence was the breath of air I had been longing for. I told myself it would be a one-time thing, that I wouldn't let it go further. But the truth is, it felt too good to stop. And so, it didn't stop. Each stolen moment, each glance shared, each secret meeting, it all became part of the lie I built, the lie that had begun with a single kiss. And with each passing day, I sank deeper into it, knowing all the while that I was betraying the one person who had stood by me through everything, Ralph. But in the quiet darkness of my thoughts, I couldn't bring myself to stop. I needed to feel alive again. And Mark had given me a taste of that life. I wish I could say I never regretted it. But deep down, I know that I will never forgive myself for what I did. Still, I kept going, because, in a way, I was searching for something I had lost and thought I could never reclaim. I wanted to feel wanted, not just as a wife, not just as a mother, but as Sophie, alive, passionate, and desired. And Mark gave me that. I thought I could keep it hidden. I thought I could continue this dangerous charade, pretending everything was fine. But nothing stays hidden forever, does it? The truth always comes to light, no matter how hard we try to bury it. Ralph, quiet as ever, noticed. I'm sure I should have known he would, but I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to acknowledge that he could see through the mask I'd been wearing so carefully. The small things, the subtle changes, started to add up. The way I was always distracted, the long hours I spent running errands, the nights I returned home later than I had planned. How could I have been so foolish? He hired a detective. The thought of it makes my chest tighten now. It wasn't even a surprise when he confronted me. His voice was calm, controlled, too controlled. But his eyes told me everything. They were filled with a kind of sorrow I had never seen in him before, a deep, painful sadness. The kind of sadness that shatters everything in its path. "You've been lying to me," Ralph said, his words barely a whisper. He didn't need to say more. I could feel it in the air. I could feel the weight of my betrayal pressing down on us, suffocating everything we once had. The room was too small, too tight. My breath caught in my throat, but I couldn't bring myself to apologize. How could I? How could I apologize for something that had already been done, something that had already broken us? The truth had cut too deep. The damage was irreversible. Ralph didn't yell. He didn't storm out. He didn't throw accusations or demand explanations. He just looked at me. And in that moment, I saw the person he had become, the man who loved me so deeply, who had given everything to me, only to have it shattered by my own hands. I felt small. So small. I wanted to vanish, to disappear, to undo what I had done. But I couldn't. The regret weighed on me like a physical burden, suffocating me from the inside out. I watched him leave the room. He didn't say another word. He didn't need to. There was nothing left to say. The silence between us grew louder, and I felt it in the pit of my stomach. It was a silence that carried with it the weight of years, of memories, of a love that had been so strong, but now was nothing but ashes. I knew then that I had lost him, and I had no one to blame but myself. And now here I stand, at the end of it all. The divorce papers are signed, the house that once echoed with the laughter of our children and the quiet hum of everyday life now feels like a hollow shell. Ralph and I have become two strangers, bound by years of history but separated by the sharp divide of betrayal. I suppose, in a way, I always knew this day would come. But even knowing it, when the moment arrived, it felt like an enormous weight had settled on my chest, crushing the breath from me. I couldn't look at Ralph the same way anymore. The man who had once been my rock, my partner, was no longer someone I recognized. In some ways, I felt I had betrayed not just him, but myself. I had longed for something more, something to fill the void, and in my pursuit, I had destroyed the very foundation of the life we had built. I can still see the look in his eyes the day he told me it was over. There was no anger, no shouting, just an overwhelming sadness, the kind that comes from realizing that something precious has been lost forever. I wish I could say I don't feel the sting of regret. But I do. I feel it deeply, like a wound that never quite heals. Yet, in that pain, there's also a strange sense of freedom. A heavy, reluctant freedom. I've spent so many years living for everyone else, for Ralph, for our children, for our family. I had forgotten what it meant to live for myself. But now, in this silence, I have been given that chance. It feels almost like a betrayal to admit it, but I can no longer deny the truth. I wanted to feel alive again, and in that moment, I realized I had to take the first step toward rediscovering who I was. Maybe it's selfish. Maybe it's wrong. But isn't that the essence of life? To seek what fills your soul, even when the road to it is painful and unclear? I don't expect forgiveness from Ralph. I don't even expect him to understand. What we shared, our love, our memories, our life together, was not something easily undone, and yet, here we are. I have hurt him in a way I can never take back. But I cannot spend the rest of my life in the shadow of my own mistakes. I have to live with them, yes, but I must also learn to move forward. So, I step into the unknown. I don't know where it will lead, or if I will ever find what I'm searching for, but I do know this: I can't remain in the same place, pretending to be someone I'm not. I have to embrace the possibility that life, even at my age, still holds new chapters, new joys, new possibilities. Ralph was my first love. My only love, for so many years. And I will always carry a piece of him with me, the good and the painful. But now, I must find a new way to live, a way that honors who I am, not just who I was. And so, with a heart heavy with sorrow yet strangely light with the promise of something new, I close this chapter of my life. I don't know what the future holds. But for the first time in a long while, I'm willing to face it. Alone, perhaps. But finally, alive.
If If you like this story and felt connected, please subscribe. Thanks for watching Gabby's cheating stories. See you on the next one.